Eric Sanzik.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Eric Zanzik from the Rustburg District, speaking on behalf of EJS Consulting Group. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on the proposed budget and for running slides there. Thank you so much for that. Jumping right in, we move to slide 2. Included a quick data integrity check for this report, showing all the fund totals for the official budget documentation and the corresponding match in this compiled report. Slide 3 shows expenses by category, so we can see a summary of all our expenses across all funds, $133 million for FY27. Transfer to the schools is at 24% of the total budget, and staff compensation and benefits directly related to compensation are also 24% of all expenses. Slide 4 shows how category shares have changed recently. The obvious outlier here is staff compensation, increasing from 17% to 20% of all expenses. CIP and debt have also gone up 2% over the same period, while everything else has gone down. Slide 5 shows school funding for this budget, which is an additional $2 million. Over this 5-year period, we have also seen 200 fewer students enrolled, and that trend is definitely expected to continue. The claim for this increased funding was to help close the budget gap in the school's budget. It should be noted that our schools are getting an additional $3 million from the state, not less money year over year, as might be the perception. And claiming that an increase in the local composite index warrants more county funding is certainly creative. In FY25, the LCI index was reduced for Campbell County, but rather than reduce our funding, this board gave the schools over $500,000 more. Now that it's going up, now that index is going up, again, we're giving them more money. So the school's budget gap was not really from a loss of revenue, but from spending. Over the last 5 years, they've given administrative positions $2 million more in compensation over teachers. It's $2 million more to administrators, and now $2 million more from the county budget. At the same time, our schools have a declining trend in metrics for success and perform below average when compared to other Lynchburg area counties and the state as a whole. Slide 6 shows that this FY27 proposed budget has a 5% increase year over year for all staff compensation on top of the 8% increase for FY26. Last year, it was suggested that we compare our compensation spend with state compensation spend, not just the budgeted amount, but what was actually spent. I did actually get to review that data through Eric Zayer's office and found that the state spend is not that comparable with spend within localities, and I could definitely speak more at length on that if we need to. Slide 7 shows what our compensation would have been if we actually did track to Social Security COLA. At the top section, you see the annual differences between our compensation and Social Security COLA. When you map that out over 5 years, total comes at $3.5 million in additional compensation over that metric. It has been mentioned that we need to compete with our neighboring counties. One suggestion was to continue these higher than average compensation increases to attract more workers. Slide 8 compares our highest paid positions with our neighboring counties, especially for Bedford, which was mentioned during the work session. Campbell is well above average when you compare to our neighboring counties. Open the Books shows Bedford's high paid positions are right around average, while we are 17% above average. Slide 9 shows a different opportunity where we might be able to compete with Bedford. The how do we compare slide from the work session, comparing our tax rates with other counties. Bedford having lower tax rates on everything except for transit occupancy tax, which does hit out of town residents more than those that reside within the county. Slide 10, my last and final points here. A timeline of large financial impacts to the county budget. In FY24, we had the real estate tax increase of 17% over equalization so that we could fund reoccurring compensation increases over Social Security COLA, $45 million for Rustburg Middle School, $35 million for Brookville High School, $13 million for the Shell Building in Seneca Park, and $10 million for a new EMS facility in FY28. Also, at the school board meeting last night, it was announced that this board already committed to take on an additional $35 million in debt to renovate Alta Vista Combined High School, though I don't recall any public conversations about that. This level of spending continues in this FY27 proposed budget with a 9% increase year over year in permanent expenses, which depends on temporary revenue from interest on investments. It's temporary revenue, given that $16 million of our fund balance is generating that interest is for landfill closure. That's not going to be there for much longer, but the permanent increase to expenses will remain. And I did think it was prudent for staff to warn against using interest on investments to fill the budget gap, and yet it is here, though, in this proposed budget. And thank you for giving me the time to speak on everything and the 5 minutes. I do appreciate it.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Mr.
Zanzik,
Yeah.
can you send me this slideshow?
Absolutely.
Email? Thank you.
Can you speak? Can you go back a slide? Because I couldn't understand. Can you say what you were saying again on that right there?
Bedford? Well, yeah, so this, how do we compare slide? It, in the work session, when this is presented, it has a lot more counties, listed. But it was mentioned in the work session that, we should be competing with our neighboring counties. Bedford was called out particularly, and I think it's interesting when you do isolate Bedford that they have us beat on every level except for transit occupancy tax. I know we do have the asterisks and the footnote there for personal property, and there's some different qualifiers that go along with how we tax that. But yeah, in general, Bedford being lower than us.
And can you speak about the state? You said you might.
Sure, yeah, if you don't mind me. I don't want to misstate anything. So yeah, the state compensation spend, it took a while. Eric's Eric, he's got great staff and they were really great working with, but it did take a while to actually get that data. So I found that state compensation spend was not comparable to compensation spend within localities. First, because the state, they have a lot of different programs and a lot of moving pieces, and it has a lot of high levels of oscillation that don't really correlate to our type of spend or any spend within locality. For example, state-funded positions within hospitals and universities have large variances when turnover occurs or programs are added or removed. Because of this, if you look at state compensation spend going from FY23 to 24, there's a 9% decrease in state compensation spend. So while at the same time, Campbell County had an 11% increase. So if I use that as a baseline to compare Campbell County compensation from 23 to 24, that would be like a 20% delta. And it would seem like we have a massive increase well above the state, which would not tell the whole story. So given that, I would really have to pick through all the state level detail and start manipulating data with filters and qualifiers to the point that credibility would be reduced to very low levels of confidence. And I don't manipulate the data for Campbell's finances, and I wouldn't want to do that with any other metric either. Secondly, another reason why I didn't include it in this is staff has made it clear that for this budget, they want to spend larger year-over-year increases than the state employees are getting in this budget. And we've therefore shifted to Social Security COLA as the primary metric as seen on page 13 of the proposed budget. So that's why I really led with that metric here on this report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Zanzik.